And then we did our first demo, and that's when it all went downhill.
It got worse? It got worse from the Snapple?
Here's a Snapple, you earned it.
And they said, you know what, guys, let's just call it. Here, have a Snapple. They give us a Snapple.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. For a long time, we've heard stories about Blink-182's first show, and given their self-deprecating sense of humor, it's easy to see why there would be silly stories and how bad they sucked. Blink was my favorite band growing up. The first band that I heard and thought, yeah, this is for me. And I saved up my pocket money to go buy the Mark, Tom, and Travis show. I liked music before this, obviously. I listened to the radio, watched my dad play guitar, went to piano lessons. But this was the first band I personally felt connected to, and they pulled me into the broader skate punk scene. So when I first bought Tales from Beneath Your Mom, I pored over every page. It's in this book that I found the first reference to Blink's first show, but we'll look at that in a second. I don't want to get into a debate about the literal meaning of the word first, or what should be considered first, especially in the context of playing gigs, where location, audience, and context can make a huge difference. Should I consider that time I played a handful of songs at a family party to be my first show? Or the time I played in front of like 3 people at an open mic? Or would it be the first time I played on stage at a bar? Or when I played a gig with a band? What do you consider first? And what do you consider important? How do you categorize it? And what does it mean to you? That's not what this video is about. And it's all subjective. So let's brush past definitions and talk about the stories which have been linked to the label of Blink's first show. With that being said, there are a few outliers or contradictions that came up during my research, so I'd like to address those and just get them out of the way. Number 1, in Joe Schumann's book, Blink-182, The Band, The Breakdown, and The Return, Pat Secker recalls that the first Blink show was a lunchtime concert at a high school. This falls under the semantic category of defining words like first and show, but I think we can all agree that playing during lunch at a school isn't the same thing as getting booked for a gig at a venue. It just isn't. Number 2, in 2014, Tom sold reproduced flyers from the April 7th, 1993 SOMA show, and the flyers were promoted as from Blink's first show. This was their first SOMA show, but not really, since it wasn't actually on the main stage, but rather in SOMA's basement, dubbed The Dungeon, which was a repurposed slaughterhouse freezer where teenagers could play and earn their way to the main stage by proving they could pull a crowd of over 100. Number 3. Kerry Key, a friend of the band and member of the Iconoclasts, has been quoted as stating that Blink's first show was at a venue called the Gorilla Pit. This was in a caption for an old Blink photo he posted on his Flickr. But after looking up the post, the caption reads one of the first Blink shows, so there's no problem there. As I mentioned earlier, our first lead comes from the book Blink-182, Tales from Beneath Your Mom, which was written by Ann Hoppus, Mark's sister, and released October 1st, 2001. The very first Blink show was on a Tuesday night at a 21-plus venue called the Spirit Club. It wasn't so much a venue as it was just a bar that sometimes allowed bands to play. There was no guaranteed payment, bands were given tickets to sell. On the night of the show, the band would return whatever tickets they hadn't sold. They were allowed to keep the money from the tickets they did sell. On the night of their first show, Blink returned all of the tickets they had been given to sell. Tom. We didn't know anyone who was over 21. We weren't even 21. We couldn't even go inside until it was time for us to play. We had to sit outside all night. Mark. There was nobody there. It was us, our friend Cam, who was the only person we knew who was old enough to go to a bar, one biker guy who was already drunk, and the bartenders. That was it. And for some reason, I was still nervous. So what did we learn? The show happened on a Tuesday night at a bar called the Spirit Club. They would keep the money from the tickets they sold, however, they didn't sell any tickets, so they had to return them all since they didn't know anyone over 21. And Mark mentions their friend Cam was the only person there other than a biker and the bartenders. And this is probably a reference to Cam Jones, friend of Blink and member of the Iconoclasts. Next, we have Tom's Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn interview from November 15th, 2001, with the first mention of the Snapple. The first thing we ever did, I remember, actually the first show we ever played, we're like at this bar, and there was nobody there. They gave us like 50 tickets to sell. I wasn't even old enough to get in the bar. And so they said, just wait outside until you're supposed to play. And I came in, no one was there. I'm like, here's all 50 tickets back. We didn't sell any. And then we played. The guy shut us down after one song, and this guy comes out of the back, and he's like, here's a Snapple. You earned it. And that was it. There's a few pieces of information we got here. We got more details regarding the tickets. So now we know that Blink had received 50 tickets to sell. And we also learned that one guy shut them down after one song, and that another guy gave them a well-earned Snapple. On June 10th, 2004, Mark did an interview with an LA-based blog site called Campus Circle, and we learned a little bit more about the story where they got shut down. When we first started out, we played at this bar, and every 5 minutes, the owner of the bar came over and asked us to turn it down. After playing like 15 minutes, he just said, you know what, you guys should just stop, and here's some Snapple, you guys earned them. They just gave us some Snapples and sent us on our way. As it turns out, there's a little bit more to that part of the story. They were in fact asked to turn down every 5 minutes, which we can intuit means after each song. And they were only shut down after 15 minutes, so probably a few songs into the set. And again, they were paid in Snapple. Fast forward to 8 years later, in 2012, we got a video interview with ID Magazine where Mark was asked about playing his first gig with Blink. Yes, we were at a biker bar in San Diego. It was on I think a Tuesday night. There was nobody there. It was the bartender and two patrons that were obviously regulars there. And we set up in a corner and they kept asking us to turn down. Finally, after 4 songs, there were 3 people in the room aside from us. And they said, you know what guys, let's just call it here. Have a Snapple. They gave us a Snapple. Most of the details from the interview align with what we already have, but there are some slight discrepancies, such as there being 2 patrons rather than 1 biker, and now we know that they played 4 songs, but the rest is more or less the same. On April 16th, 2024, Fender dropped a video called In Conversation with Tom DeLonge, featuring the Tom DeLonge Starcaster Artist Signature Series Fender. A bit of a mouthful, but they dropped it to market Tom's new Signature Series Starcaster. The first show we ever played, it was a bar in San Diego. And so I go down there and I go, we really want to play here. I'm just looking at where live local bands play. And the guy goes, okay. And he goes, this is how you get paid. I'm going to give you 50 tickets. And you could sell those. And whatever ones you sell, you get to keep the money. And so I'm like, cool. We show up to play and here's all 50 tickets. I don't know anyone that's 21, you know? And he's like, fuck, okay. Well, you get to play. It's 7 o'clock at a bar. Nobody's in there. The only person that's in there was the dude that gave the tickets. So as we're playing, he's sweeping the fucking floor and taking the chairs off the tables. And he just keeps looking at us and we're playing. My friends that would be our roadies couldn't come in either. So they're outside the door. They only let us come in underage to play the songs and leave. So we get done with a 20-minute set. He puts the broom down. He's still the only dude. He goes, don't break up, because I hear something here. You've got to figure it out, but I hear something here. But it was so cool because that one little fucking moment made me feel like someone believed in us. Even as we got bigger, you could play in front of 1,000 people, but if one dude came up and genuinely meant something cool, it meant so much to me. I was like, fuck. We didn't really get that much new information from this interview, but Tom does specify that they started playing at 7 p.m., while the dude that gave them the tickets was sweeping and taking down chairs. However, here he says that the only person there was that dude. No bikers, no patrons, just that one guy. But more importantly, he places emphasis on the encouragement he received from that one guy and how much it meant to him, turning it into a quite touching story. Sorry, I'm going to go on a side tangent here. At this point in my research, I was pretty convinced that the guy Tom mentions was the club owner Jerry Herrera. He's a longtime bar owner slash show promoter in the San Diego new wave scene. He was very likely dealing with the bands and tickets, so if the dude that gave them the tickets was the one that encouraged our boys, I'd like to think that it was Jerry. Here's an excerpt from a 1991 LA Times article about Jerry and the Spirit. The death of touring acts at Spirit, however, has proven to be a boon to local bands. Even those musicians who complain about Herrera's policy of not paying an untested group are grudgingly thankful for the opportunity to perform their own music in public. But although he remains something of a champion of local original music, Herrera confided that such support comes at a cost. Herrera said it has been a while since he has seen any groups come through with the sort of strong songwriting that could land a record deal. Nor does he sense anything new and fresh that could take hold of the 90s the way new wave grabbed the early 80s. Who knows, maybe Jerry saw something in Blink's songwriting that reminded him of the music during the rise of new wave in the late 80s. The Spirit did not last much longer after Blink's first show, closing its doors in 1995 before converting into a heavy metal club called Brick by Brick, which might explain why Mark remembers and refers to the Spirit as a heavy metal bar in his 2025 memoir. Speaking of Mark's memoir, let's jump into that. A little over a year ago, on April 8th, 2025, Mark Hoppus released his memoir called Fahrenheit 182. If you don't have the time to or just aren't all that interested in reading, you can pick up the audiobook, which is narrated by our boy, Mark Hoppus himself. In chapter 10 of the book, Mark recalls Blink's first gig. In March 1993, we got the chance to play our first show in an actual venue. Our friends in the alt rock band The Iconoclasts booked a heavy metal bar called the Spirit Club in Mission Beach on a Tuesday night and invited us to open for them. A real show? Hell yes! It was sort of a pay-to-play situation where we were given 50 tickets to sell in advance of the gig. We were supposed to peddle the tickets to our friends and family and bring the money back to the club as recompense for them allowing us the honor of playing on their stage. But we didn't know many people, and we were lazy. So when we arrived the day of the gig, we just handed all 50 unsold tickets back to the owner. We loaded in and waited. The doors eventually opened, but no one walked through them. Not one person showed up. I don't know why I was surprised by this, or why I'd expected people to come. Why would anyone pay money to see two bands they'd never heard? When I say no one was in the venue, that included us. I just turned 21, but Tom and Scott were still teenagers and had to wait outside. And except for their guitarist Cam, the members of the Iconoclasts were also underage. We skated in the club's parking lot until it was finally time for Blink to go on. We walked on stage and played our first show ever to an empty room. Our only witnesses were Cam and a bartender sweeping the floor in front of the stage. Sensing our obvious disappointment, the bartender pulled us aside afterwards and said, "Look, I know no one is here, but don't quit playing. I can hear it. You guys have something special." Whatever the bartender heard that night, it sure didn't feel special, but it didn't matter, because we'd played a real show. But was it a real show? Like that old thought experiment about a tree falling in the woods with no one around to hear it. I had to wonder the same about us. If a band plays a club, but there's no one there to watch them, does it count as a real gig? So, let's go through that and see what we got. The show was in March of 1993. The Iconoclasts booked heavy metal bar The Spirit Club. It was a Tuesday night, and they were given 50 tickets to sell, but returned all 50 unsold tickets. No one showed up, since only Mark and Cam were 21. And we have the mention of the bartender sweeping the floor, who pulled them aside and said, "Don't quit playing, you have something special." Now there are a few things missing. What about the Snapple?
Snapple, made from the best stuff on earth.
It's all mine.
Other than specifying that the show was in March 1993, there isn't anything new to learn here. However, there's no mention of bikers, patrons, being told to turn down, getting shut down, or the Snapples. But Mark then continues and asks himself, does this count as their first show if there was no one there to see it? For the record, yes. Clearly yes, absolutely yes. You were on a stage, you played. Even if there were no patrons, bar people were there, like staff. It counts. You can't just take my first show away from me like that, okay? There's implications for all of us here. We have all played shows for no one. It still counts. A few months later, we got another show at a biker bar in Chula Vista called the Gorilla Pit. It was way out in the seedy outskirts of town, near the Navy docks, where no kid in their right mind would go. This time, there was an actual human there. He was a disinterested biker in a leather vest who nursed a beer at the bar with his back to us, but still, a human. This gig officially counted. The stage was just a small platform a few inches off the ground. There were no microphone stands, so we played instrumentally. After we finished our first song, the bartender waved us over and told us we were too loud and needed to turn down. We played a second song, and he told us we were still too loud and needed to turn down more. Then, after the third song, he called us over. Hey guys, I think that's enough for tonight. Good job. He handed us each a Snapple. These are on the house. You earned them. So as it turns out, whether for brevity or just to make it a little funnier, the story of Blink-182's first show is actually an amalgamation of their first 2 bar shows. One where they weren't able to sell any tickets, played to no one, but were encouraged to keep going, and one where they played to a biker, were continuously asked to turn down until they were shut down and given some Snapple as recompense. My theory is that Mark knew that the stories were smushed together and figured that his memoir would be as good of a place as any to make that slight correction. Oh, and I guess Carrie Key was kind of right all along. At least part of the story Blink was telling did in fact happen during the show at the Gorilla Pit. Go figure. And a huge shout out to the folks at Blink-182 Timeline and Blink-182 Italia. They put out heaps of Blink-182 related info. I honestly don't think this video would have had half of the content without them. If you'd like to throw some support my way, like, sub, watch the video 200,000 times, all of that stuff. And go stream my music on Bandcamp or whatever platform you prefer. I'll put the links in the description. If you were wondering about the songs that were played in this video, they were mine, so go find them there. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
All right, what are they laughing at?
They're having fun. You're funny. You're a funny guy, man.
I'm right on the TV.
Yeah.
But the thought, could not escape that one. Wow. I tried. No escaping that sneeze.
Men cannot wink and look cool at all. There's no way that men can wink and look cool. We just look dumb.
Okay. Whoa, that was a good take too.
Hi there, a bodybuilder from California writes, nothing tastes better than a Snapple after an intense workout. Teddy, you lift it, you keep it.
Might as well drink this son of a bitch.
Months ago, there's about 150 scholars of cool that got together up in the mountains, and they all figured out that this was the coolest thing ever made. So this is certified cool by the scholars of cool. So I think that's what's important as well for you to know.
God damn. Aight. Let's do this.